All right, let's dive right into this explainer with the absolute incredible true story of Marcus McDilda. He was an American fighter pilot captured back in August 1945, and he told a desperate bluff that literally changed the course of history. We're going to unpack exactly how a single outrageous lie ended the most devastating conflict the world has ever seen. Pluses and minuses around a lead shield, melted from the middle, a terrible earthquake. That totally nonsensical phrase brilliantly illustrates the wild imagination of a man just trying to save his own life. Facing brutal interrogation and execution, McDilda, a guy who knew absolutely nothing about nuclear physics, pieced together this completely fabricated, honestly kind of hilarious explanation of how an atomic bomb works. He was just trying to buy time, knowing full well his captors would kill him the second he wasn't useful. But he didn't stop there. To really satisfy his captors, he went all in. He didn't just invent the fake science, he boldly lied that the United States had 100 of these devastating bombs ready to drop on Tokyo and Kyoto right that second. 100. Keep that number in mind because what's truly fascinating is how this desperate, entirely made-up figure actually ended up influencing the highest levels of the Japanese command. Section 1. The Quantum Communist. The unlikely architect of the bomb. So to really understand why McDilda's wild bluff worked, we have to look at the bizarre science that made the real bomb possible. Think of classical physics as the predictable, everyday stuff, governed by Newton's laws, calculating the speed of a car or a falling rock. But as scientists started looking closer and closer at atoms, they discovered this realm of complete subatomic chaos that required entirely new scientific laws. This chaotic quantum realm held the key to ultimate power. And mastering it, well, that was the greatest challenge of the 20th century. And to tame all that quantum chaos, the US turned to J. Robert Oppenheimer, a theoretical physicist. Basically, his entire job was researching complex mathematical models to explain natural phenomena, often exploring crazy ideas no one had even asked for yet. Oppenheimer was an absolute master of this. He was a guy whose literal job was solving universe-altering problems entirely on blackboards. Now, here's an incredible paradox for you. Oppenheimer's wife, his brother, and his girlfriend were all active members of the Communist Party. He was completely surrounded by the ideology. And yet, right in the middle of a massive, unannounced U.S. crackdown on communism, General Leslie Groves basically looked past all those glaring security red flags to hire Oppenheimer purely on merit to run the top-secret Manhattan Project. It was a huge, huge gamble. Section 2. The Unfair Nuclear Race and Why the Axis Failed. You see, America wasn't the only nation trying to build a bomb, but it definitely wasn't a fair race. Germany, Japan, Soviet Russia, they were all competing, but they all failed. The Manhattan Project thrived because it was in a totally secure homeland with limitless resources and massive, sprawling secret cities like Oak Ridge. Not a single bomb fell on American soil to disrupt their work. Meanwhile, the Axis projects were literally crumbling under relentless Allied bombing. They were starved for resources, and in Japan's case, they were dealing with an emperor who honestly just lacked interest in the project entirely. Section 3. A Defeated, Stubborn Foe and the Necessity Debate. By mid-1945, Germany had already surrendered, which left Japan as the final target for America's terrifying new weapon. And this sparked a massive internal debate about whether it was even necessary to use it at all. To really grasp the sheer scale of Japan's devastation, before the atomic bomb was even ready, just wrap your head around this staggering number, 100,000. The non-nuclear firebombings of Tokyo in March 1945 alone incinerated a quarter of the entire city and killed over 100,000 civilians. It was the absolute deadliest non-nuclear attack of the entire war. So you've got to wonder, right? If Japan was already basically destroyed and essentially out of the fight, why wouldn't they just surrender? Well, the answer lies deeply embedded in their culture. Japan's emperor was viewed as a literal, direct descendant of the sun goddess. So an unconditional surrender wasn't just a military defeat, it was a total cultural and religious collapse. Because of that, they were preparing for a completely suicidal land defense instead. Put yourself in the shoes of the American leadership for a second. Well, scientists like Oppenheimer were actually begging the government to just demonstrate the bomb harmlessly, maybe blow up an empty stretch of desert or drop it in the ocean. President Truman and his military leaders were looking at some brutal realities. They desperately wanted to save countless American soldiers' lives, avoid a catastrophic bloody land invasion, and frankly, they needed to justify the unbelievable $4.1 trillion modern equivalent price tag of the war. So they made the heavy choice to drop it. Section 4. The final blows, from Trinity all the way to Nagasaki. The dramatic climax of all this began in July 1945, out in the Jornada del Muerto desert with the Trinity test. It was a $2 billion gamble that literally turned desert sand into glass. And hey, let's actually bust a huge Hollywood myth right here. You've probably heard the famous quote, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Well, Oppenheimer didn't dramatically declare this out loud during the test. He later recalled that he was thinking it, translating the ancient Sanskrit text, the Bhagavad Gita, to himself as he watched that terrifying canopy of fire rise up into the sky. What follows is just an incredibly dense, chaotic sequence of events that finally push the stubborn Japanese command past their breaking point. Just look at how fast this all happens. August 6th, Hiroshima is bombed. Just 2 days later, August 8th, the Soviets declare war and invade Manchuria. The very next day, August 9th, Nagasaki is bombed. It's a rapid, totally unprecedented cascade of devastation. But wait, here is the absolute most shocking irony of the entire war. 3. Despite projecting this image of absolute, limitless destruction, the United States only actually possessed exactly 3 atomic bombs. That's it. One was used at the Trinity test, one on Hiroshima, and one on Nagasaki. Meaning, by August 9th, they had used every single one. The American nuclear arsenal was completely, entirely empty. And this is where it all comes beautifully full circle. At the final Japanese War Cabinet meeting right after Nagasaki, the leaders were deadlocked. They couldn't agree. Then suddenly, the Japanese war minister tells the cabinet that America has 100 more bombs ready to drop. They actually surrendered largely because they believed Marcus McDulda. That desperate, completely fabricated lie from a captured pilot about those 100 extra bombs ended up being the final psychological blow they couldn't withstand. Section 5. Surrender and the aftermath. That pilot's absolutely wild bluff worked. On August 15, 1945, the Japanese people heard the divine voice of Emperor Hirohito on the radio for the very first time in history, announcing that they must endure the unendurable and finally accept defeat. But the post-war peace was incredibly messy. As the brutal Cold War kicked off, Oppenheimer, the father of the bomb himself, found himself a target. His past communist ties, the exact ones General Groves had completely overlooked to win the war, alongside his vocal opposition to building an even bigger hydrogen bomb, led his own government to turn against him. His security clearance was completely stripped away in 1954 in a massive wave of paranoia. So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. If the bomb was genuinely meant to end all wars, why did its creator immediately become an enemy of the state? The atomic bomb ended World War II, absolutely. But the paranoia, the massive global arms races, and the sheer absolute power it unleashed immediately set the stage for the new world order we are all still living in today. It's a heavy, complex legacy, and we are absolutely still grappling with it.